Why Star Trek TNG movies could never top First Contact. Star Trek First Contact proved to be the gold standard that Star Trek, the Next Generation's movie franchise, could never top. Directed by Jonathan Frakes, Star Trek First Contact premiered on November 22, 1996. Grossing over $92 million at the North American box office, Star Trek First Contact was the highest earning of the four Star Trek The Next Generation movies. First Contact is also the most popular TNG big-screen adventure among Star Trek fans, and is considered one of the best overall Star Trek movies. Star Trek Generations ushered in the Star Trek The Next Generation movie franchise in 1994, with Captain James T. Kirk William Shatner passing the torch to Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart. Star Trek First Contact did better business than Generations and was a hit with critics and audiences. However, TNG's movie dominance would take a downturn. 1998 Star Trek Insurrection was less well received than First Contact, and 2002's disastrous Star Trek Nemesis killed the TNG movies for good. Nearly 30 years later, Star Trek First Contact still shines the brightest among the films about Captain Picard's Starship Enterprise. Star Trek First Contact upped the action ante and delivered a whole new Star Trek The Next Generation movie experience. First Contact was no glorified episode of TNG, it was a Star Trek spectacle worthy of the big screen. Captain Picard's battle against the Borg infecting the USS Enterprise E showed a new side to him, with Jean-Luc gripped with madness and a single-minded fury to stop the cybernetic villains. First Contact boasts thrilling action sequences, including Picard, LT, Commander Worf, Michael Dorn, and Mr. Hawk, Neil McDonough, fighting the Borg in deep space on the Enterprise's hull. Star Trek Insurrection and Star Trek Nemesis continued presenting Captain Picard as a phaser-toting warrior, but the personal animosity Jean-Luc felt toward the Borg gave Star Trek First Contact more urgency and verve. Picard's mania added an intriguing new wrinkle to the wise and moral starship captain, and it was fascinating to see Jean-Luc struggle with his morality with the help of Lily Sloan, Alfre Woodward, one of the best guest stars of the Star Trek movies. Star Trek First Contact is a thrilling roller coaster delivering a Star Trek The Next Generation experience unlike any other. Star Trek First Contact bringing the Borg, the most popular villains from Star Trek The Next Generation, to the big screen was a must-see event in and of itself, but the movie's masterstroke was creating the Borg Queen, Alice Krige. The Borg Queen was instantly iconic and was a menace unlike any other seen in previous Star Trek movies. The slinky, robotic Alice Krige infused the Borg Queen with malevolence, intelligence, and uncanny sexuality that made her a distinct and unique Star Trek antagonist, and a direct threat to Captain Picard and Data. The Borg Queen made such an impact that she did something no other Star Trek movie villain has done by appearing in multiple Star Trek TV series. The Borg Queen, Susanna Thompson, Alice Krige, returned to become the arch-enemy of Captain Catherine Janeway, Kate Mulgrew, in Star Trek Voyager, and a different incarnation of the Borg Queen, Annie Wersching, Alison Pill, became both a threat and an ally in Star Trek Picard Season 2. Alice Krige's original Borg Queen was finally defeated by Admiral Picard and the USS Enterprise D's crew at the end of Star Trek Picard Season 3, finishing what Star Trek First Contact began. Star Trek First Contact is often hailed as the pinnacle of Star Trek The Next Generation TNG movies, and with good reason. It seamlessly blended action, drama, and the rich lore of the Star Trek universe into a thrilling cinematic experience. Yet, despite the legacy of this film, the subsequent TNG movies, Insurrection, 1998, and Nemesis, 2002, could never quite reach the same heights. The reasons for this are multifaceted, and range from the unique strengths of First Contact itself to the shifting landscape of cinema and the constraints placed on the follow-up films. A perfect villain, the Borg and their unique appeal, one of the primary reasons First Contact stands out among the TNG movies is the villain. The Borg, introduced in TNG's TV series, had already been established as one of Star Trek's most terrifying and enigmatic antagonists. Their cold, collective hive mind and relentless desire for assimilation posed a threat that was far more formidable than many of the villains that had come before. The Borg's chilling refrain, "Resistance is futile," became synonymous with dread. In First Contact, the Borg's menace is magnified by the introduction of the Borg Queen, portrayed by Alice Krige. The Queen gave the Borg a face, one that could express malice, cunning, and a perverse form of seduction, making the collective more personal and immediate. Her dynamic with Captain Picard, Patrick Stewart, deepened the emotional stakes, as Picard had a personal history with the Borg, having been assimilated by them in the series. This created an internal struggle for Picard that added layers of tension and drama. Subsequent TNG films lacked a villain with the same depth and existential threat as the Borg. Insurrection featured the forgettable Sana, and Nemesis introduced a clone of Picard, Shinzon, who never quite resonated as a truly compelling antagonist. Without a villain that could match the psychological and physical danger posed by the Borg, those films lacked the same edge. High stakes with emotional depth, First Contact also struck a perfect balance between high-stakes action and emotional depth. The film centers on the Borg's attempt to travel back in time to prevent humanity's first contact with an alien species, effectively altering the course of history. This plot allowed the film to explore not only the usual Star Trek themes of time travel and futuristic technology, but also deeply personal issues. Picard's trauma from his assimilation by the Borg in the TNG series became a central emotional arc in the movie. His obsession with defeating them, his internal conflict, and his eventual breakdown in the face of his crew's challenges added an emotional intensity that grounded the film's science fiction premise. His journey from a man consumed by vengeance to one who rediscovers his humanity was a poignant through line that added layers to the narrative. This kind of emotional weight was less present in the subsequent films. Insurrection opted for a more episodic, lighter tone, and Nemesis tried but failed to capture the same emotional resonance. Picard's confrontation with Shinzon in Nemesis had the potential for depth, but the film's rushed pacing and uneven script undercut the emotional impact. Exceptional pacing and cinematic scope, another key element that sets First Contact apart, is its pacing. Directed by Jonathan Frakes, who also played Commander Riker, the film balances intense action sequences with moments of introspection and character development. Frakes' direction brought a sense of urgency to the story, but he never lost sight of the characters' personal journeys. The action, whether in space or on the ground, always felt motivated by the narrative and not like set pieces added for spectacle's sake. The film also managed to evoke a grand sense of scope. The battle between the Federation fleet and the Borg cube was one of the most visually impressive sequences in Star Trek up to that point. Meanwhile, the scenes on Earth during humanity's post-apocalyptic recovery phase provided a stark contrast, grounding the film with a vision of Earth's vulnerable past. The combination of space opera and intimate historical fiction made First Contact feel more cinematic than any TNG episode or the other TNG films. By contrast, Insurrection and Nemesis struggled to balance pacing and narrative depth. Insurrection was criticized for feeling like an extended TV episode rather than a feature film, with its more limited stakes and smaller-scale action. Nemesis, while featuring some impressive visual effects, had a muddled story that tried to combine personal drama with large-scale conflict, but the pacing felt disjointed, and the film never quite found its rhythm. A fresh approach and bold vision, First Contact also benefited from a fresh and bold approach to the Star Trek formula. By introducing time travel and incorporating Earth's first contact with an alien race, the film expanded the scope of the Star Trek universe while maintaining a personal connection to the series' lore. The introduction of Zefram Cochrane, James Cromwell, and his historic warp flight tide